Welcome, everybody, to today's Meet the Articles Forum, brought to you by the Nantucket Civic League with the tremendous support and assistance of Nantucket Community Television. My name is Scott Wilson, and I am the co-president of the Civic League, along with Charlie Stott. The Civic League is a 501c3 nonprofit corporation and is a nonpartisan organization. Our mission is to preserve the island's resources, improve the quality of island living, educate the public on island issues, and encourage participation in island government. This forum is one in our regular series of Meet the Articles forums, supporting your informed participation at Nantucket's annual and special town meetings. The next town meeting is our annual town meeting that will take place on Saturday, May 3rd, starting at 8:30 a.m. Today's forum is our second one this season, following on last month's town governance forum. That forum was devoted exclusively to the question of whether or not Nantucket should change to a town council, town manager form of government. The question will not be decided at next month's ATM, but it will be the subject of a non-binding sense of the meeting question, which would be the first item on that ATM's agenda. That question concerns whether or not you, as a voter, have an interest in converting from open town meeting to a town council, town manager structure. The forum that we delivered on this issue was very informative and is available for viewing on YouTube. We strongly encourage all Nantucket voters to view it. Today's forum will cover several articles of interest to Nantucket voters. First, we will hear from town managers who will discuss several articles related to significant budget item and capital appropriations. After that, we will move to several articles of special interest, and we will close by hearing from the individual proponents of the four different articles related to short-term rentals, Articles 66, 67, 68, and 69. Throughout today's Zoom, those of you watching can submit questions via the chat feature on the Zoom toolbar. Please only submit questions that relate to the article or articles then under discussion. Please submit questions only, not opinions or advocacy pieces. We will try to get to as many of your questions as we can. Please note that we will not tolerate personal or ad hominem attacks. It's about the issues, not the people. We appreciate your attention and participation. And with that, let's get started. Our first discussion today is going to be led by Andrew Patnode, who's the DPW director for the town, and he's going to talk about the Lovers Lane supplemental appropriation. Andrew?
Thanks, Scott. Article 3 includes reappropriations to help fund the construction of the Surfside Area Transportation Improvements Project. This project began over 10 years ago when the county took Lovers Lane, Monahans Road, and Orkawa Ave, which were previously private roads. As Nantucket's year-round and seasonal population continued to grow, these roads became more heavily traveled as drivers sought alternate routes to avoid traffic on Old South Road. However, the roadway and drainage infrastructure in these areas were not designed or constructed to handle the increased usage and were aging rapidly. In 2018, phase 1 of the improvements in this area saw the town reconstruct the boulevard, including improved roadway cross sections, drainage, and the construction of a new bike path to connect Surfside Road to Clifford and ultimately Belvedere Beach. These same improvements have been designed for the 3 streets in the project area. Now we seek to build what was originally planned to be phases 2 through 4 as a singular project. This approach yields better continuity between these 3 roads, both from a design and construction perspective, condenses the overall construction timeline, hopefully yields more competitive construction bids, and allows the town to finally make much needed improvements through this already heavily traveled corridor. We have completed final design of these improvements, and the project has been out to bid since March 25th. Our goal is to utilize these reappropriations to afford us the ability to award the project in May and start construction this fall. Over the last year, we continued to refine the cost estimate for these improvements. While realizing that the anticipated construction cost far exceeded our current appropriation, we were faced with a challenge and a choice. To solve this, we first applied to Mass DOT's Chapter 90 program for funding, and we were awarded almost $3.2 million towards the project. Secondly, we could either ask Nantucket taxpayers to pay an additional $5.5 million to fund the construction, which would further increase property tax bills, or we could reappropriate money that has already been taxed and we have been unable to spend. Basically, should we ask for more or spend what we already have? The hard truth is that we are in an exceptionally busy period of roadway, utility, and capital projects, all entering their final surface restoration and paving phase and we have one asphalt plant and paving contractor on the island. 2 miles-long sewer projects, a water main project, an airport project, airport housing project and sewer extension, Mass DOT's intersection improvements at Milestone, at Pulpus, and Richmond Great Point's development off Old South Road, just to name a few, are all vying for asphalt and time in Victor Brandon Corporation's schedule this spring and fall. This list doesn't include any other private and public developments and my annual roadworks capital improvement plan. So we felt that reappropriating funds already available was the best way to move this decade-long project forward to implementation, because it can happen in parallel with those other ongoing projects. The reason for that is because approximately 85% of the total project cost is earthwork, clearing and grubbing, gravel roadway subbase, drainage infrastructure, signage, fencing, pavement markings, etc. And only about 15% is paving, which happens in the latter half and very end of the project. This project is long overdue. The longer we wait, the more this project will cost. And ultimately, we didn't feel it would be in the community's best interest to ask for additional tax dollars when funding was otherwise already available. Additionally, we will soon be submitting an application for up to $5 million in funding through a MassWorks grant, which we feel well positioned to be awarded. That funding could be used to further fund the project if needed, or be used to offset any borrowing costs, further reducing the burden on local taxpayers. Our approach still leaves $2.4 million remaining in prior capital appropriations to spend on improvements to our roads, sidewalks, bike paths, and cobblestone streets through June of this year. Reappropriating these funds in Article 3 does not leave us worse off as a community, and the remaining appropriations and amounts included in Article 10 allow us to continue getting as many annual maintenance projects completed as our community's capacity allows over the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. What would the projected completion date be if this is approved?
We would expect that all of the improvements to the roadway, 2 miles of new bike paths, and all the drainage infrastructure, loaming and seeding, and all punch list has to be completed before summer of 2027.
Wow. Okay, thank you. Next up is town employee housing. Christine Ferrantella, please.
Good afternoon. I'm here to speak about Article 11 for municipal employee housing. So Article 11 seeks to approve borrowing $14 million to support the design, permitting, owner's project manager, and construction of new town employee housing on 3 town-owned lots along Waite Drive. This funding also requires approval upon a debt exclusion at the annual town election. This project will create 9 new housing units, including 3 single-family homes and 3 duplexes, for a total of up to 25 bedrooms. This is part of a master plan to utilize town-owned land for housing our municipal employees, those who plow our roads, maintain our infrastructure, respond to emergencies, and keep our community running every day. This land was acquired. It's a 20-acre parcel known as 2 Fairgrounds from the Nantucket Electric Company in 2004. This parcel was later subdivided into 2, 4, and 6 Fairgrounds Road, as well as A&R lots and roadways of Waite Drive and Tacoma Way. A 2004 site planning exercise recommended that the site be used for municipal functions and housing. The lots on Waite Drive offer sufficient space and zoning potential for various housing configurations that can address multiple family sizes and needs. Centralizing housing at Waite Drive allows the town to manage a single site more efficiently instead of handling the logistics of multiple scattered site rentals. This centralizes the approach and increases oversight and maintenance efficiency. We all know that the island's housing crisis is no longer just a housing issue, it's a workforce issue. The lack of year-round housing makes it increasingly difficult for the town to attract and retain qualified staff. Positions remain unfilled and departments are stretched thin. Rising rental prices and limited availability of year-round rentals leave many municipal employees without a viable option for stable, long-term housing. This article represents a strategic long-term solution. By building and controlling housing for municipal employees, the town can ensure its workforce remains stable, effective, and embedded in the community that they serve. It also supports the Select Board's strategic plan to expand affordable housing opportunities that meets the town's staffing needs. This project protects the long-term sustainability of our workforce and the quality of life for our island residents and visitors alike. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Before we move on, just a reminder to the audience, please submit your questions using the chat function. Just click on the chat button at the bottom of your screen and type in your questions. Next up, we're back to Andrew with Article 12, the Public Works Supplemental Design Approval.
Thanks, Scott. Article 12 at the 2025 annual town meeting seeks $1.2 million in supplemental funding for the design of a new public works facility. This request aligns with the Select Board's strategic plan for efficient and effective town operations, particularly in the maintenance and improvement of municipal infrastructure, and it also supports the strategic plan focus area of environmental leadership with its proposed location on town-owned property at 1 Shadbush Road. Article 16 of the 2018 annual town meeting appropriated $2.3 million for the planning, design, permitting, and other professional services associated with development of a new DPW facility at 188 Nantucket Road. That appropriation has since been amended twice, Article 17 of the 2023 annual town meeting to include 10 Sun Island Road, and Article 15 of the 2023 special town meeting to include 1 Shadbush Road as potential locations for the new DPW facility. A feasibility study was conducted early in the planning process that thoroughly examined those 3 potential locations, resulting in the decision to relocate to Shadbush Road. This decision aligns with the town's goals of coastal resiliency planning and hazard mitigation and provides a centrally located permanent home for the Department of Public Works. Over the last 7 years, a little over $2 million has been expended or encumbered through contracts. More recently, a preferred schematic design of the new DPW facility has been selected after thoughtful development of a site plan and building layout. This resulted from DPW program review and confirmation, which was an exhaustive review of DPW staffing, daily and emergency operations, our current facilities, vehicles, equipment, and other assets as part of the schematic design phase. Today, we are in the process of furthering the design development phase focused on site and building details, energy assessments, industrial equipment design, and detailed floor plan layouts. Currently, the critical path for the project, permitting through HDC, MEPA, and Massachusetts Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program are underway and on schedule. Over the last 13 months, we have also worked very closely with the Nantucket Hunting Association throughout planning, schematic design, and design development phases of the project, including a robust public outreach and communication campaign and collaboration on shared site elements and other improvements. This article seeks to appropriate the necessary funding to complete the final design phase, develop bid and construction-ready documents, and bid the project for construction. The request supports the town's long-term operational and environmental objectives by designing a sustainable, code-compliant, and energy and operationally efficient facility to serve the needs of this community for decades to come. Thanks.
Thank you, and we'll stick with you, Andrew, to talk about Article 14, which is the Tom Nevers Bike Path Supplemental Approval.
That's right. You guys are getting a lot of me today. So Article 14 at the 2025 annual town meeting seeks to appropriate a little over $6.85 million to construct a bike path along Tom Nevers Road from the intersection at Milestone Road all the way to the Tom Nevers Park and former Naval Base. Article 10 at the 2019 annual town meeting appropriated $331,000 for the design of the bike path, which has long been identified as a much needed improvement in this area. Tom Nevers Road is long, straight, unfortunately inviting for high speeds, and has frequent intersecting streets on the west side from Milestone to Arlington. Thus, a bike path connection would provide a safe facility for pedestrians and cyclists to use the entire length of the road, rather than being forced to share the road with motor vehicles. This important connection from the popular Milestone bike path to a recreational area on the South Shore will be a welcome addition to the town's already impressive network of bike paths, supporting the Select Board's strategic plan focus area of transportation, as well as healthy and vibrant community. Town staff and our consultant have been working on refining the design of this bike path, which is proposed to include a boardwalk feature through the low-lying land bank property located at 50 Tom Nevers Road. The bike path will be constructed on the east side of Tom Nevers Road from Milestone to Old Tom Nevers Road, and the south side of from Old Tom Nevers Road to the park. We are working on maximizing safety and enhancing the user experience while minimizing property impacts to limit the need for permanent easements. We've also been coordinating with National Grid regarding the location of existing utility poles and guy wires along this corridor, which we expect will not conflict with our design. Recently, the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, or BPAC, and the MP and EDC have reviewed the proposed bike path design alternatives and have selected a preferred alignment. This preferred alignment would see the full length of the bike path separated from the road by a grass shoulder if approved by the select board. Our current design, bidding, and construction schedule, which is a bit aggressive but realistic, would see this path constructed and available for public use prior to the 2027 summer season. Thanks.
Thank you. We don't have any questions, so we'll move on to the next part of our agenda. This part relates to two articles that were put forward by the town that they wanted to speak on, but we felt were more important. And so we've assembled a panel of people to speak on these two issues. The first one is Our Island Home, and the presenter of that is Dawn Hill-Holgate.
Good afternoon. Thanks for hosting this event. I am going to talk about the new proposal for Our Island Home. We are proposing a 45-bed modern facility with the option to add 12 additional beds. The 45 are proposed as single rooms, 12 are oversized, so they could accommodate semi-private rooms in the future if our population needs require it. We accommodate 45 people at any one time, but remember that that's on a rotating basis because there are short-term rehab stays and so forth. And those 45 people touch every family member and person in the community that they come into contact with, as well as the 30+ staff members that very efficiently run the island home. Why are we proposing this? The current facility was built in 1980, 1981, and it is outdated. It is failing in many areas. It's too small. It's not up to current codes. We've continued to put Band-Aids on it for far too long, and we've gone back to the drawing board a number of times to address community concerns with both operations and with siting and efficiencies. We've really come up with a very solid plan at this stage. Unfortunately, the expenses have grown quite significantly since COVID, so this will be one of the largest asks that we've brought forward as a community at a current estimate of around 111 million. Part of that has already been appropriated in an $8.5 million design. We also, a few years ago, approved a $5 million permanent override for the operations of this. Between the design and the 5 million, that was why the select board continued down this path to propose a new facility, taking those as strong indicators that the community wants to stay in the nursing home business and have something locally to provide the services that our community needs. And as I said, both for longer term elderly care or for short-term rehab for all populations. If this is approved, which requires both a vote of town meeting and a ballot question for the appropriation, we will make some efforts to try and reduce the cost. The Friends of Our Island Home will speak to their fundraising efforts. Regardless, we do need the full appropriation at this time. There are also contingency fees built into the overall number. The building cost is approximately 93 million. And I should mention that on April 9th, we will have the finalized numbers. This project is being fully bid rather than estimated. So when we go to town meeting, the numbers will be concrete. There's $13 million included in this that is attributed to housing and land and additional land use. Our agreement with Sherburne Commons had previously allowed us to take up a little over an acre of property. And we have now reached an agreement with them at an impact fee of $6 million to to have a overall footprint, including the landscaping and the parking, of just over 3 acres. And that allows us to build a 1-story facility, which for both operational and public safety concerns is a necessity. There may be questions about why we are not rebuilding on the current site. The current site is not large enough. It's about 2.5 acres. And it would be, and we did study this extensively, it would be impossible to remove the current facility and rebuild in its place, even in a smaller footprint, without stopping operations or moving people to numerous different locations to be able to do that construction, even with phased approaches. Let's see. We do understand the impact on the tax base, and a calculator, which the finance director can speak to, has been put up on the town website, where you can put in your exact assessment, whether you get the residential exemption, and know exactly what the impact will be to you. The things that I like to suggest that people think about are, when you need this level of care, you or a loved one, it's a necessity. It's really not a choice. And the decision here is whether we want to continue to provide this locally, or whether we want to be subject to sending people to the Cape or farther, depending on availability of beds in this industry. And then be subject to a rather challenging travel and expensive travel schedule to be able to see a loved one. So we really want to establish a skilled nursing facility that meets the medical needs of our seniors now and in the future. The quality of life that is needed by keeping it here, as well as short-term rehabilitation options so that people don't need to travel. We envision this as a warm, welcoming home that prioritizes both the individual care and community connection, and with a much greater dignity than is currently available in the existing facility. And when I speak on this, I do not speak about the staff. The staff gives incredible care, but they deserve a new facility so they can provide the proper level that is needed, and have the ability to have this last for decades to come for our community, and to also have the option of adding additional people as the population grows. I'm open to questions, but I know the friends are going to speak as well, and the finance committee chair.
Thanks, Don. We really appreciate your coming on and doing that. There are a couple of questions that are related to why should in this day and age should taxpayers have to pay so much for so long for so few? And a lot of people manage to travel off island weekly to visit their relatives. But I think you answered that with the pretty compelling argument about, the point that we're at a tipping point. We have to decide how we're going to do that. We're either all in or we're not. And this is sort of the question.
That is the choice here, Scott. It's whether do we want to continue to provide this level of care on Nantucket? And then people should think about all of the personal implications that there would be if it's not available.
Indeed. The finance committee supported the motion, it just supports the article, but it was split. And we originally asked Denise Cronau to come on as chair of the finance committee to state her position. She's having personal issues that she has to handle. So Stephen Maury from the finance committee is going to step in and provide the back and forth that went on in the finance committee over how they would vote on this. Stephen.
Thank you, Scott, and thank you to the Civic League for putting on this forum. It's such an important service to the community, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a bit of the Finance Committee's perspective. Denise just messaged me a few moments ago that she had a personal issue come up, so I didn't come prepared with a lot of remarks, but of course I was involved in the discussion when the Finance Committee addressed this issue. It was a split vote, as you described. It was a 6-3 vote. The three dissenters, or the three who voted in the minority, did so on financial reasons. They didn't think that the business case for the island home and its ongoing cost could be supported or should be supported from the Finance Committee. But the majority of us, and I did vote with the majority, believes that the island home is a vital service to the community. It's an unusual service for a municipality in Massachusetts. A few years ago, when this was last up for discussion and debate, we were one of two municipal facilities, and now we're the only municipal facility of this kind in Massachusetts. And I think sometimes that is construed as a reason maybe that the town ought not to be in this business, but Nantucket is very unique. We aren't a 45-minute boat ride away. We aren't a car ride away. We are essentially a day or a night away from being able to see somebody. You can't finish a work day, hop on the ferry, drive likely off Cape, as Don alluded to. There aren't beds of this type in facilities that are available on Cape. So you're likely going to visit loved ones, friends, and family off Cape. And then you're going to be spending the night somewhere. And then, that's at not just an inconvenience, that's a significant cost. And it's going to mean disconnection in a lot of ways from people who are important to all of us. I know that my, several relatives, but my grandfather on my dad's side, he spent his last days in the island home. I spent a lot of my early days in the island home when my mom was a physical therapist there. And I think most people, panelists and attendees and people who will watch this on rerun, have some connection with this facility. And I'd ask you all to think about, what does the future look like as our population ages, as we all age? Where do we go for care? And think logistically about where you would have to go if these services can't be provided on island.
Thank you, Stephen. Before we turn to the other panel here, just to recap what Denise said, Denise felt the need to go public with her views on why she voted no, and it was purely financial. She noted that the subsidy, our island home as it exists today, doesn't break even and requires a subsidy from the town of about $5 million a year to cover that. And with the new facility, that could go up to around $14 million a year. She noted that it'll cost, the cost of ownership over 25 years is approximately $350 million when you add up all that. And the island is facing, over $200 million in debt exclusion requests at this annual town meeting, with our island home, housing, the need for housing, the bike path, and the DPW facility. So it's just a lot of money, and she didn't feel it was fiscally prudent investment for our community, and was very concerned about its impact on the individual taxpayer. It's a lot of money. But anyway, she also understood it's a very emotional topic, and it's just a very, very, very expensive but hard question.
Absolutely, Scott. And if I could interject there, there are a number of services that the town engages in which are never going to be profitable. The school being one. We made a decision a long time ago that we think it's important as a municipality, as a commonwealth, as a country, to provide certain services which we know will never generate revenue to cover the cost. It is up to each of us as individuals and voters to determine if we want to stay in this business and provide this care. Personally, I think it is an important service, is an important thing that we can continue for the community. But I also understand the financial picture that we're looking at. And in addition to everything that you just named, we have coastal resiliency, we have potentially a new municipal office building. There are a number of expenses, and those can't be overlooked. And I see in the chat here from Kit Murphy, shouldn't the moral arguments be left to voters to town meeting and the finance committee weigh in strictly on a financial basis? And that's a very narrow view of what the finance committee does. That's not our charge. I mean, we're required to make recommendations on every warrant article, and we look at more than just the finances. And so I understand why that might be some viewpoint, but we do look at more than just the dollars and cents of issues.
Dawn?
I think people do need to think about it a bit as, if the choice is to stay in the business, have we brought forth the best plan to do so? And I believe, yes, I believe that we really went back to the drawing board in 2018 and addressed many of the prior concerns, and that this will operate in a very efficient manner. It does not require staffing changes, and the building itself will be a net zero in terms of those operational costs. We also do hope that the fundraising effort will be successful and we won't have to borrow as much money. Hopefully we don't have to use the contingency money, and hopefully there will be rebates that will come from the federal government for energy efficiencies. But again, we have to ask for the full amount now. And I think that that's what voters need to decide. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce Allison Forsgren and Kathy Greeter. Allison was a co-founder of Friends of Our Island Home in 2013 and has been an active board member since. She became involved in elder advocacy when her parents moved to Nantucket and her father was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. She's a facilitator at the Memory Cafe, a volunteer at PASCON, and an original member of the Nantucket Wheelers. Kathy Greeter joined the board of our Friends of Our Island Home in 2018. Her mom became a resident that year. She is also a member of the Family Council of Our Island Home. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the two of them to make their pitch. Kathy?
I'm going to go first.
Very well.
I'm Allison Forsgren again. I have spent a lot of time in the current facility, both when my father and mother were there, and since. And it's a vibrant, welcoming, and pleasant place to spend your time when you can no longer spend it at home. You know, our original goal when we started Friends of Our Island Home was to bring the outside world into the facility. And to that end, we've done a great job, you know, along with the staff and the volunteers that have been attracted there. Things are really at a good place at our island home. We were fortunate at the very beginning to be supported by the Community Foundation of Nantucket, who accept the donations made to us, and actually, you know, our bank. They sent thank yous and have really made our efforts go a long way. So the town of Nantucket has supported care for the aged and infirm since 1823. So for a long time, the town of Nantucket and its people have recognized the need for this kind of care for people who can no longer care for themselves at home. So there's really always been something here for that population. And I think the town has made it clear in all of the most recent votes that they really care about keeping the island home here. And, you know, families struggle when they can no longer care for their loved ones at home anyway. So going to the island home is not a luxury or something that people choose to do. It's because they have to go there. And I have lived through, I've got personal experience dealing with trying to care and advocate for a loved one in a skilled nursing facility off island. And it's something that, I learned some hard lessons and, actually brought my parents back to Nantucket to be at our island home. So, and people talk a lot about only 45 beds. That is the maximum number we can have right now without going to the state and getting approval for more. But since 2005, the last 20 years, 883 families have benefited from keeping their loved one at our island home. So that's not, that's families, 883. And, most cases, or most people at the island home are in it for the long-term residential care. But in the recent past, with the current administration, they've accepted more and more short-term rental. Short-term rental, stop. Short-term patients. Oh geez, where's the number? Oh yeah, 33 short-term rehab patients have graduated from our island home and gone back to their own homes since 2023. So, that's a revenue producer when people are in for short-term respite or palliative care. They bring income into the island home. So that will continue and increase when the island home is a much more up-to-date and attractive place. So I think things will change when it comes, with the new building. It will be, more attractive and more and just better for everybody's staff and residents and families that visit. So we support this project and we'll do whatever we can to help make it more palatable for taxpayers. So Kathy?
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thanks for having us here today. We don't expect that everyone will support building the island home totally with tax dollars. So the Friends of our Island Home have been working with the Community Foundation for Nantucket on a plan to help reduce the burden to the taxpayers. A special fund has been created by the Community Foundation for the Friends of our Island Home. The fund is called Our Island Home Capital Campaign Fund. We're asking for commitments until when and if the town votes to accept a new Our Island home. The purpose of this fund is to appeal to community members and philanthropists who have so generously supported other important services with their private funds. No money will be accepted until there is a positive vote at the annual town meeting on May 3rd and at the ballot on May 20th. Then these commitments will become actual donations, and the Community Foundation will work with the town to disperse the funds. If you're interested, there's a commitment form on our website, friendsofourilandhome.org, or the Community Foundation's website, cfnan.org. If you have any questions, please call Community Foundation at 508-825-9993. We would like to have as many commitment forms as possible sent in before the town meeting to show support for this fund. And on another note, Friends of our Island Home, along with support from Dreamland, NCTV, and Mind's Eye Communication, have scheduled a public forum this coming Thursday, April 10th, at the Dreamland. The forum will bring together community members, business leaders, and local representatives to explore this critical issue. Tickets are free and open to everyone. If you're interested, the Dreamland has asked for people to go to their website and register for the free ticket. Also, with the help of NCTV and Mind's Eye Communication, we have completed 4 podcasts by people who have had loved ones cared for at our island home. You may listen to these podcasts on our website, friendsofourilandhome.org. Supporting the construction of a new Our Island home is more than just a financial decision. It's an investment in our elders, our community, and the values that make Nantucket unique. We're asking everyone to please support our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll turn to questions now. Let's see. Charity Ben asks, what is the availability of the facility for non-Nantucket residents? Dawn, I don't know if you can. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, no one can be turned away if they qualify to be in the island home, but the actual history is that it's long-term residents or people who have long-term family members. They're very, very much connected to the island. And in reality, it's kind of the reverse of why would someone go here when their loved ones are 30 plus miles on the other side. It's all people who are somehow part of the Nantucket community.
Thank you.
Scott,
Yes.
there was a late question from Rick Atherton about the Lover's Lane supplemental appropriation that Drew had discussed, and he had asked about if the funds will actually eventually increase taxes. And I think that it's just important that that article was Article 3, which is a transfer of funds, and the supplemental appropriation in that article is all from free cash. So there's no additional borrowing authorizations in Article 3, so there'd be no additional impact to any taxes, because it was authorized, through free cash, and it's just simply transferring it from an approved article into that appropriation.
Understood. Thank you. Lots of criticisms and no real questions here. Select Board Finance Committee should show how taxes have increased over the last 10 years. I don't know if any of you have any information about how much taxes have gone up per person, on a per person basis over the past 10 years.
I think that's data that we would have to compile.
Right.
And there's more than one reason assessments have gone up, because real estate sales have gone up as well.
Another question, what is the cost of in-home skilled nursing for 45 people in a year, assuming 24/7 coverage?
That's actually a really good question, because it would be very cost prohibitive to have round the clock care. You're looking at a skilled nurse in your home 24 hours a day, which probably requires 3 skilled nurses on a weekly basis. Plus you're also adding all of your food, all of your cleaning and maintenance of the home on top of that. And there are hurdles with handicap accessibility and so forth. A lot of the people who end up in the island home are at a stage where they're in a wheelchair.
Another question. Yeah, sorry.
No, that's fine. That was it.
How much are the costs for annual off-island staff agency, which provides nursing and support staff? That's sort of a.
The finance director might have the exact cost, but we are now contracted with a private entity that really is doing a pretty great job. They're doing a pretty great job providing us with the skilled staffing and expertise that we need to keep this facility running. They've also increased our revenue, but I don't have the exact figures in front of me.
Will that say, another question, how will the management of our island home take place? Will it be outsourced to EF Senior Care?
We'll continue with the current staffing, and at the moment we may continue to outsource to that organization or another one.
Remind me, you said the new facility will have room for 45?
45, but 12 of the rooms are oversized, so they could accommodate 2 people. If we want to go to 57, and with the licensure, we're currently licensed for 45. There is a provision in the state laws that we can increase that by 12 if the need arises.
How does that
That's
compare?
why it's a magic number.
How does that compare to the current facility?
The current facility is 45, but only 3 of the rooms are private. And hospitals in general, since COVID, have all gone to private rooms for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
So we're trying to build for the needs of the future and keeping people as healthy as possible. But we did allow the ability to have some semi-privates if the need arises. Generally, the census is in the high 30s, low 40s.
Right.
But we do see an increase in our older population that may need to be addressed in the future.
And the existing facilities, has it always been operating at full capacity?
It generally operates at a high 30, low 40 number. There's usually a couple of extra beds available, which is a good thing because people have an immediate need, and there's generally no one's turned away.
Another question, Dawn, has the select board compared Martha's Vineyard's equivalent?
Yes, I wish Bob was here because he can speak a little bit more to the details, but it's a different operational model. There are some things that are not included in their number, like there's no land cost, for an example, but they are also well ahead of us. This will not be being constructed until 26, 27, because we'll have to phase the housing components first. We have to relocate Sherburne Commons existing employee housing to free up this site. So that all needs to happen to not interrupt their level of services by disrupting their staff. So we'll be building new employee housing for Sherburne Commons and acquiring the use of their existing 16 bedrooms will be moved to the sewer department's land at the end of the road. Also, gaining us 16 bedrooms for town employees.
Thanks. Somebody asked, can't the land be donated to the town for our island home?
The land is in our contract with Sherburne Commons that we can build a facility there. When we did the long-term land lease with them, we incorporated that. The reason we are paying an additional impact fee is they were concerned that the construction could impact them, and we needed to take up more land area than they were anticipating. So it was a negotiation to provide them with a cushion to continue another, very vital operational model to the island, which is the senior living at Sherburne Commons.
Maureen, do you see any more questions? I think that covers it. We'd like to thank Kathy Greeter and Allison Forsgren and Stephen, Maury, and Dawn for their participation on this panel. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on now to Article 81, which is the license of Baxter Road property for erosion control. And the presenter on that is Vince Murphy. Vince?
Hi, thank you, Scott. All righty.
Yep.
Let me just set up my screen. Thank you. Okay. So we're here to talk about Article 81. In the fall of 2023, the Select Board voted to work on the Sconset Bluff project to stabilize the toe of the rapidly eroding coastal bank. In reviewing all the legal requirements of such an action, we drafted this article to comply with Chapter 67 1E of the Town Bylaw. This requires a license be voted on at town meeting. The project would build on the existing GO2 project from 85 to 105 Baxter Road and expand the works from 41 to 119 Baxter Road. This is a cooperative plan with neighbours to control erosion for both private property and critical town infrastructure, such as roads, town water and sewer, as well as access to the lighthouse. Geotubes are the core part of this plan, with adaptive phases in the southern area that include coir logs and dune management. There are a variety of components in the plan, and the state has a broad definition of coastal engineering structures. This article reflects the variety of coastal engineering structures in the plan. It also refers to operation and maintenance as outlined in the project management of the notice of intent, and how we will all oversee this project together. The project was heard in front of the Conservation Commission for over 14 months. That is the longest hearing in the Commission's history, as far as we are aware. Some pressing issues were heard during this time, including construction sequencing, with Reach 1 needed first, how to deal with core logs, and the missing sand. All of these were dealt with to the town and commission satisfaction to allow the work to proceed. The end result is a positive order of conditions from the Conservation Commission with about 60 requirements to the order. This means the Commission will allow the geotube construction and resolves all of the historic issues of missing sand by requiring a plan be placed to place the missing sand volume to be approved prior to construction. With this permission and under the Wetland Protection Act, this can now be built with town meeting approval and a license from the Select Board. The Natural Resources Department can provide a copy of the CONCOM order of conditions to anyone that would like a copy. This project is in line with the Nantucket Coastal Resilience Plan and the Baxter Road Long-Term Planning Study, both completed in 2021. The town is drafting the terms of the license that would have elements such as oversight, time limits, plans and escrows for removal, reports, and other elements as the Select Board may deem fit. Much of the land is town land, and this lease license agreement and issuing a license would allow the project to move forward, be paid for by residents, save taxpayer funds, and reduce the risk to public infrastructure. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Vince. Next to speak on this issue, excuse me, is Emily Molden, who is the Executive Director of the Nantucket Land and Water Council, an island nonprofit environmental advocacy organization with a focus on protecting our waters and natural resources for the long-term health of our community. Emily's worked at the Land and Water Council for 15 years as an ecologist before moving up to become the director in 2019. Emily, over to you.
Thank you so much, Scott, and thanks for having me here this afternoon. So the Nantucket Land and Water Council participated extensively in the recent Conservation Commission public hearing process, expressing opposition along the way to the proposed geotube expansion, and we will be strongly opposed to Article 81 at town meeting in May. We're opposed to this article and are advocating for the community to vote against it for the following reasons. First, the existing geotubes have clearly caused damage to the fronting and adjacent public coastal beaches, as well as accelerated erosion of the coastal banks to the north. Extending this installation, even as it's conditioned by the CONCOM's permit, will significantly exacerbate this accelerated erosion. While we recognize and support the CONCOM's inclusion of a condition that requires the full sand deficit from the prior permit to be provided, the mitigation requirements conditioned in the permit for the new geotubes will not be adequate to mitigate the impacts of the project. In addition, respectfully, the town's partner, who will be responsible for this massive volume of mitigation, has a very poor track record for providing it. And as the record shows, once these geotubes are installed, they're very difficult to remove, despite conditions of permits, escrow accounts, even court orders and agreements with the town. We have been here before. Secondly, we feel that the town has far more to lose than it does to gain. The town's own consultant, Arcadis, who conducted the long-term planning effort for Baxter Road, did not recommend expanding the geotubes, nor has the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. The estimated cost of this project will be millions and millions of dollars, and maintenance costs will continue for as long as the mile-long installation is in place. While this project is promoted as a privately funded project, We ask, is such a long-term project with this amount of private funding sustainable financially? What happens if the town's partner stops paying and walks away as it has in the past? What could the town ultimately end up on the hook for from not only a financial, but also a time and resources perspective? There is a logical alternative for the town to address its liability and protect the public's interest. The town's engineers have completed the Baxter Road Alternative Access Plan, which they have stated can be constructed within 3 years. The town should proceed with this plan and in the meantime, maintain and mitigate the existing geotubes with the addition of softer core installations in adjacent areas as needed. This will allow for the ongoing protection of access and utilities for residents, as well as access and parking for the lighthouse. Once the town's liabilities and public interests in this area are addressed through the alternative access plan, we really should be focusing on the multitude of other island locations identified in our coastal resilience plan because of their critical ties to community health and public benefit. The town is spread so thin as it is, and this is simply not an appropriate or wise long-term use of the town's resources. Thirdly, there are a variety of issues that have not been addressed by the Concom permit, including long-term sand delivery. Hundreds of thousands of cubic yards of sand are required to be delivered to the Sconset Beach over the next 5 to 10 years. The impact that we can expect of sand delivery alone on the surrounding infrastructure and community is alarming and has not been properly considered or addressed. According to our calculations, Phase 1 alone of the geotube expansion will require well over 4,000 dump trucks of sand to be delivered over about 7.5 months, and that's just during year 1. Finally, we believe that Article 81 is drafted as much too broad and open-ended. The language of the article is not limited to the specific project as recently permitted. The specifics of the license, as you heard, are still being discussed and are not yet available. And this article is essentially seeking pre-approval for any erosion control project, including bulkheads and the like, that the select board deems appropriate at this location in the future. We believe that this is inappropriately undermining the intent of Chapter 67 of our bylaw that requires town meetings consent in the first place. Finally, I just want to recognize that this is clearly a very important and sensitive matter as it involves very real private and public property interests. But it does not make sense for us to simultaneously retreat and armor the bank. The town has many priorities when it comes to coastal resilience, and for all of the reasons stated, we do not believe this should be at the top of our list. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Emily. Well spoken. Vince, a couple questions for you. I think we know this. Is there an actual license in place, or are we voting on allowing the select board to negotiate the license?
Good question. So we are hopefully going to bring something before the select board in the next couple of weeks before town meeting to demonstrate what the content of the license might be. It has a lot of things in it. I've kind of outlined them just a little bit. Elements such as the oversight, how the oversight will work, time limits to make sure that it has times either for review or the full length of the license, so that the SBPF will have to come back and update or renew the license and have to appear before the select board for that. The understanding for how the removal plan and the escrow for the money for the removal plan will be put in place, and all the reports. So that's the kind of things that would go into the license, but that's kind of at a minimum. There's a large number of things that would probably find their way into the license that would increase the oversight, dictate how the project would run, and then show the town as the manager or the overseer of the project to be used on public land, so that we can really address the issues, some of which Emily raised, to resolve the trust issues and show that we are fixing this and making sure that there's good, adequate oversight of the use of public land to fix any of the previous issues, and also make sure that there's no negative consequences for the public land. I hope that answers the question.
Another question. Permitting this extension of the existing erosion control geotubes will require significant and costly amounts of sand. which Emily mentioned, in order to mitigate the damage caused by the new structure. Will there be a bond requirement for the SBPF so that the Nantucket taxpayer will not be liable for any damages caused by either the sand transfer process or the wide variety of structures permitted under this article?
Essentially, yes. The word bond was used just there. We use the term escrow. Either way, it is a fund of money, a pot of money, that if anything goes wrong, for the sake of argument, then we have a fund to be able to rectify it or even remove the structure. The current structure that's on the ground has an escrow fund in place so that the town has the money in place itself as given by SBPF. It is an escrow fund so that the town could remove the existing structure if needed. However, we've partnered with SBPF in order to move forward and defend this area and make sure that we have a way to not have to do that, not undertake removal, but protect the bank. And then in terms of retreat, I think it's probably one or the other, not both. So either we have a very costly retreat plan that the taxpayer would have to pay for upfront and in the region of 24 million, or we have this privately funded project that was of minimal cost to the taxpayer, essentially privately funded, with the only town role being oversight and management.
Can Vince guarantee the license agreement will be completely negotiated and ready to understand in enough time before town meeting?
We're talking about bringing it to the select board as category headings, so that people will understand what can go into it. And then after town meeting, it'll have to be looked at by select board. It could be how long is a piece of string. So it doesn't necessarily have to get done within a few months or even a year or a couple of years. It can take as long as the select board needs to get the license terms together. And in that process, the public will surely be able to have some say at select board to be able to talk about the terms of the license. So we will have something ahead of town meeting at select board, category headings, and then afterwards, prior to construction, because the license is needed before construction can start, we will be able to negotiate out the fine details.
Who do you negotiate those details with? Is that with the SBPF?
It'll essentially be the select board putting it together, and the members of the public can give input, SBPF can give input, but it's essentially a select board license.
Has the SBPF been involved in the preparation of the license, or the ideas in the license to date?
No, not to date.
Okay. Can you tell us how much money will be escrowed?
We need to study that. We have a ballpark figure in mind, but we do need to refine that. The project will be in 2 phases. So the phase 1 is what we'll need the initial escrow for. That's for reaches 1, 2, and 3. And essentially that would go from 73 Baxter Road to 119 Baxter Road. Good to have notes. And in that area, that will be the 3 reaches for geotubes. That's what we would need the escrow for first. It will be many millions of dollars, and it will have to also probably be index linked, so that it'll be a fund that would continue to grow as construction costs go up over time.
And that escrow will be available to cover the cost of damage to the roads and things like that?
That's an unknown at this time. When it comes to the roads and the volume of trucks, the interesting part about it is the community that the trucks will impact the most are also the people that fund this on the Baxter Road area, that will have the trucks driving through their community in order to protect their homes. So yes, there's disruption to them, but it's also disruption that they are paying for financially.
Is it possible to somehow deliver the sand by sea?
At the moment, there is a discussion about looking at offshore sand mining and then barging to the site. But as part of this current project, no, it is all about trucking the sand there.
Yeah. Okay. Many more questions? I think that's it. Thank you both very much.
Excuse me, Scott. This is Maureen.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Maureen.
I think there's a question, several questions, which go to the fact again about the town meeting, because many things that Vince is talking about are, this will be done later and this is going to be part of it, but we don't have any
I see.
we don't have any idea yet in writing guaranteed about what is going to be happening. And in essence, people are asking, how can we approve something until we know what exactly we are approving?
I can address that.
Go ahead, Vince.
The Conservation Commission only finalized and approved the order of conditions on March 20th, about 2 weeks ago. So it has only been resolved for 2 weeks. We've had a bit of a running list, as you might imagine, for what might go into the license. It didn't make much sense to go to sending that list to town council until we had the approved orders in hand. Now that we do, now we have the orders of conditions. Obviously, we went to finalize the bullet points of the list and sent that to town council. It's with town council and it will be before select board in the very near future, before town meeting, hopefully.
Thank you. Anything else, Maureen?
No, I think there's still
well, there's
there's just simply concerns about
right
things being hopefully and could take a very long time to be done, and the rest of it, and the there's a question about the bylaw that was passed that requires this would arguably require that this information be available before the town can make a reasoned approval. So, in terms of the bylaw, I guess someone like Vince to speak to, in terms of the specificity of the bylaw, how does this fulfill the bylaw's requirements?
Through you, Scott.
Please.
The term of, so the bylaw that's being referred to is chapter 67(1)(e) of the town's municipal code. This is effectively requires that any coastal engineering structure that's going to be constructed on town property must seek approval at town meeting. It doesn't say about the terms, it doesn't say about anything other than that. It just says if there's a plan, then it needs to be approved at town meeting before construction can begin. It's a little bit on the basic side. And in the lease license agreement we're talking about here today, this is the lease to license agreement that first has to be approved by a town meeting before it can get approved by select board. So we are following the obvious and standard protocol of first seeking the approval at town meeting, and then we can negotiate the fine terms of the license. This is the higher level question. Will the town allow for this project to be constructed on this piece of land? Then after that, we're going to show up before town meeting what the type of terms are. But then after town meeting, we have quite some time to be able to work out the fine points, and all of the members of the public on here and others that are interested outside of this can all attend to give the select board meetings to give their opinions and their views on it, should it first pass at town meeting.
Vince, I'll read this question just the way it was written to me. Why not defer this until the fall special town meeting to give the select board and town council time to draft something? I think what you're sensing is a lot of concern about, God being in the details and wanting to understand what that is.
Quite simply and quite openly, and not to turn my broken record on, but we will have something before town meeting. And it is only within the last 2 weeks that we have finalized the list that is going into the license. We had to have the CONCOM agreement first. CONCOM order of conditions. We can't just magic things out of thin air. We have to follow linear requirements, and that's where we are. The commission finished their decision 2 weeks ago. So then we cleaned up our draft that we've been working on for quite some time, sent it off amongst town admin, finished the draft, get it to town council, and they're reviewing it. It will be before select board, before town meeting, so people can give their opinions. The point is, people will get to see the content of the license before the type of content for the town meeting before. Excuse me, I'll start again. The type of content of the license before town meeting, and then the fine details can be worked on afterwards, ad infinitum. But afterwards, there's no guarantee that the select board will approve the license. They have that option too, not to. So there's lots of choices left in this. And you can pick anything apart as much as you want. The reality is we are following a common sense approach.
Okay, I'll let that be the last word, Vince. Thank you very much. And thank you also, Emily. Great job. Okay, we're going to turn now to zoning articles 60, 61, 63, and 64, I think. The 4 zoning articles sponsored by Stephen Maury. Stephen, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Scott. I don't know the articles well by number, so
Right.
through these. Article 61.
So 60 is
60. Thanks.
60 is the first one.
Okay, so Article 60, I requested, and the planning board gave this article a negative recommendation. All of these articles pertain to the same property, or 2 properties rather, known as 13A and 13 Woodland Drive. Together they comprise 5 acres of land, and it's a split zoned property. So 2 acres are in residential 20, so half-acre zoning, and 3 acres are in LUG 2. So 3 acres are in a 2-acre zone. Article 60 would have changed the zoning for the portion which is now in R20. I asked for, and the planning board gave this a negative recommendation. So I don't intend to challenge that recommendation. It's not something that I hope to pursue. So I'll pass over that article. Certainly I can answer questions on it, but again, it's not something that I want to pursue at this point. Article 61 is Article 61 relates to the 3-acre portion of the property, which is now in LUG 2. That's a zoning district where the minimum lot size is 2 acres. This article proposes to place that portion of the property in the R20 district. That would match it with the rest of the property, with the rest of itself, essentially. So now all 5 acres would be in the R20 zoning district. That would also match it with the rest of Woodland Drive. So brings it in uniformity with itself and with the rest of the neighborhood. There's a lot of text here about sort of the preamble, why I want to make this change, which relates to affordability and price caps on the homes that would be built on the property. And you can see that's all subject to the property being added to the town sewer district. After long discussions, or I should say several discussions, I think we had 6 meetings amongst neighbors. We came to, well, we were headed in the direction of an agreement on an appropriate number of dwellings, which this property might be restricted to, which would be many fewer than I had proposed for this property at last year's special town meeting, and in line with the number of dwellings which might be built today. However, at any number of dwellings in that range, in the 15 to 18 dwellings on the full 5-acre site, I would need significant subsidy from the Affordable Housing Trust or some other group in order to be able to make the commitment to voters at town meeting that the homes would all be available at prices of 240% AMI or less. And for not for lack of trying, but those commitments are not available from the Affordable Housing Trust. They have other priorities, other projects in place. And so I'm not able to make the commitments that I hoped to make. I'm not able to restate the commitments that I made before a special town meeting last year. And so I have unfortunately, after almost 3 years of trying to make this plan or some version of this plan where the homes built on the property would be dedicated to year-round occupancy and to some level of attainable pricing, I've had to pivot and come up with a different plan. Just over the course of the last week, I've been discussing with neighbors an alternative concept where I would put a different set of restrictions on the property. Currently, the property has been, talking about the full 5-acre site now, it was approved last September for division into 5 buildable lots, each of which could support 3 dwellings. So a total of 15 dwellings on the 5 acres. What I am proposing now is that I will limit the total site to a total of 9 dwellings. So total 9 dwelling units on the 5 acres. And I am still asking for support for this Article 61 to make the zoning uniform across the whole property. So again, this would be fewer dwelling units than are allowed today, but it does request a zoning change so that the homes can be sited more regularly across the whole site, rather than condensed in the 2-acre portion, which is in R20. And yeah, maybe I should leave it there for questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Here to present her view is Mary Lepre, a family nurse practitioner who also works in the public schools and with Addiction Solutions. She became more interested in local politics after finding out her water was contaminated with PFAS from the firefighting foam. Mary, over to you.
Hi. So I think Stephen sort of said this. I think these articles sort of remind me of the Phoenix and Harry Potter, as they just keep popping up and then they just change and remain a moving target. Does not sound like there is an affordability or attainability aspect to this at this point. So I just wonder what the benefit is to the neighborhood at this point to increase the density, to increase the density. What benefit does that bring to the neighborhood at this point when it's not going to be any attainable housing, it sounds like, and the sewer is not an option. So I guess I don't see, and I think a lot of the neighbors don't see a lot of benefit to a benefit to the community to increase density. I think that the nine homes sounds much better than what it could have been, which was, I think, at one point up to 36. But these articles do increase they more than double the allowable ground cover that currently exists, which is currently about 15,000 square feet, and would increase it to 36,000 square feet. So I do, and I don't think I'm alone, have a lot of questions as far as will what is said today really happen? Will it be what was said last year? Will it be what was said at the planning board earlier this year? I'm not really sure because it does keep changing. So that's what I have.
Thank you. Stephen, any rebuttal?
Yeah, I have been steadfast and remain so that voters at town meeting will know exactly what the implications are of changing zoning. In this latest proposal, I'm not able to put the affordability restrictions on that I had hoped to do. I needed either an increase in density or subsidy, and neither of those things is available. So instead, what I'm proposing is actually a reduction in density. It's a reduction in the number of dwellings from what is allowed now. I see a question here from Art. Would your proposed restrictions to a single family dwelling include a prohibition on accessory dwelling units? And the answer to that is yes. So one total dwelling for each of the buildable lots. Charity, your question, how is this different from spot zoning? This zoning would be, it would match the rest of the neighborhood. This wouldn't look like, as we look at the zoning chart, they're all different colors. This wouldn't be a color that doesn't match its neighbors. This would actually be bringing the property in line with the rest of all of the properties on Woodland Drive. Oh, you're muted.
There's one further question there from Charity Ben, Stephen. How is this different from spot zoning?
Yeah, I think I just addressed that. So this is not spot zoning. Spot zoning is when you change a property zoning to something that doesn't match its neighbors. And this would actually be bringing it in line with the rest of the Woodland Drive neighborhood.
Thank you.
And in fact, in line with itself.
Thank you, and good luck at town meeting.
I see Mary has a question, and then there's a couple more.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Mary, you're muted.
I didn't bring up, and I would like to hear what Mr. Maury has to say about Articles 63 and 64, because those were included here, and that would be changing it from the county overlay district to the town overlay district. And my understanding is that the county overlay district does not require sewer and water because it allows more requires more setbacks, but the town overlay district does require town sewer and water and has less setbacks. So I guess, would you still be advocating for Articles 63 and 64 in light of what you've said?
No, short answer is no. I brought those forward because R20 is a town zoning district as opposed to a country overlay. We have village residential is the corollary half-acre zoning in the country overlay. And so I brought it forward because last fall, it was a criticism of my earlier articles that I didn't propose to change the overlay district. And so I brought these forward in order that the new zoning would be in keeping with its overlay district. The planning board didn't support that concept, and it's, again, I brought it forward because I thought that would keep it in line with the intent of the overlay districts, but it's not something I intend to challenge. The negative recommendation from planning board is fine with me. Oh, I see Charity. What are the benefits to the neighborhood? The benefits are less density. I mean, one of the things that I heard consistently since last spring was concern about traffic and the number of dwellings. Currently, the property with 5 buildable lots can be up to 15 dwellings with at least 10 different owners and maybe 15 different owners. I don't know yet if it's settled law on whether an accessory dwelling unit can be owned separately from other dwellings, but it can be 15 dwellings for sure and at least 10 different owners. And so my proposal is 9 total dwelling units, 9 different owners. So lower in both regards.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? I don't see any further questions. Oh, does Christy have a hand up?
I had a question for Stephen. In moving in this new direction, will you see any restrictions in terms of regulating short-term rentals, or would this now be more based on kind of a seasonal occupancy in these dwellings?
You know, I don't know why there would need to be those types of restrictions. I mean, if there were, my goal and intent has been that these would be home ownership opportunities for year-round residents. It can't happen. It can't happen without, you know, probably, I don't even know that 27 dwellings without subsidy would have worked. Certainly without sewer, 31 bedrooms spread across 5 acres. I can't do those things. So I don't know. I can't think of another example where short-term rentals are outlawed. It's not the intent of what I'm doing, so I suppose I'd entertain that. It hasn't been a thought.
Good question. I think that's it. Stephen, thank you. Mary, thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott.
We're going to turn now to the 4 short-term rental articles, 66, 67, 68, and 69. And I think we'll just take them in order, numerical order. So we'll start with 66, which is sponsored by Caroline Baltzer. Caroline Baltzer, a social scientist by profession, is an appointed member of both the Town Council Study Committee and the Capital Program Committee. She's been a member of the board of the Brant Point Association for 5 years and a member of the Nantucket Civic Association. She's the 6th generation to reside on the jetties at Nantucket and proudly follows family role model and civic leadership from both the 19th and 20th century, most proximally that of her late cousin, Bill McCumber. Caroline, over to you.
Thank you, Scott, and thanks for inviting me today. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your hosting this every year. It's very helpful. For 4 years, we've been out at an STR town meeting stall, where we've all become beleaguered by one topic. So I recognize that this is an exhausting topic for all of us. And so with that said, the primary issue has been the fear that voting in something like my article 66, which is a zoning bylaw requiring 2/3 vote, would open the floodgates. And that if we had passed it over these 4 years, that there would be an STR in every corner by now. Fortunately, that has not occurred. But during this period of time, the 4 years of struggling with this, 2 things have happened. We have been designated as a seasonal community by the Commonwealth, a boon which helps attainable housing in resort economies all throughout Massachusetts, on the shore as well as in the Berkshire Mountains. And number 2, Nantucket's tax revenue from STRs has been falling. Last year, it was down 27% for high season. That's 2024 as compared to 2023. With that kind of verified data, we don't need to wait for any more. This year, a zoning bylaw like Article 66, requiring the 2/3 vote, will benefit from the tincture of time. With 5 years out from the pandemic, we have been able to see the fact that the spike in the STR numbers has fallen precipitously, not just last year, but steadily over time. And that the island's 150-year history in renting cottages has always been self-regulating, and we see that it has also done this now. We have also passed 4 different restrictions and regulations in that period of time, but those are all general bylaws. And so they require the zoning bylaw, like Article 66, to actually legalize our rentals. We have recently found out from the land court that none of our rentals are legal, not long-term and not short-term. So we need to address that immediately. So Article 69, as compared to 66, it proposes gathering another 3 years of data. And its author has recently noted that there has been largely irrelevant historical data used in the support of short-term rentals. However, we know zoning decisions are based on exactly that, customary and historical use. And with an island that is a national historic landmark, with all of the protections that go with that, the business of the island is history, and all of the ways that Nantucket has kept its history intact. Short-term rentals and short-term Nantucket vacation rentals, as my article redefines them, are one of those official ways. So as Nantucket prepares to vote at its annual town meeting on May 3rd, the island finds itself at a critical juncture. The community must decide whether we want to preserve the unique character and economy that has defined it for generations, or whether we have changed so much in our character that we want to move on from what we have been. We have also a land court judge's February warnings about our stalled legislative process to consider. We have as well to answer the same judge's discovery in March that our original verbiage written into our 1972 zoning code, which permitted rentals and leases of all lengths, was dropped sometime after 1991 from our current zoning code. As for Nantucket's 2024 seasonal communities designation, it recognizes that 60% of our housing stock is used for seasonal or recreational purposes, rather than as, quote, primary residences. This designation is part of the state's Affordable Housing Act. The recognition lies in the state's acknowledgement that Nantucket is no ordinary municipality. It is the only whole island National Historic Landmark, a designation granted in 1955 to Nantucket to promote the general welfare of the inhabitants through the preservation and protection of historic buildings, places, and districts. Nantucket's unique architectural and zoning patterns, which have evolved over centuries, reflect this history. Indeed, it is the fact that we have rented our houses to visitors for 150 years that has directly contributed to the preservation of so many of our historic properties. Now, with our new designation as a seasonal community, the responsibility falls on the voters to interpret zoning and land use issues through the lens of the island's unique identity, rather than by applying standardized primary accessory use models from the mainland. I have written Article 66 to respond to all of these factors. Article 66, in keeping with Nantucket's historical practices, it recognizes that NVRs are a permitted use in all the areas which they have traditionally been, and are fitting with the island's seasonal community designation. In contrast, Articles 67, 68, and 69 seek to impose restrictive measures on STRs, including minimum residency requirements for owners, limits on the number of rentals, and other controls. These proposals have been met with warnings from Nantucket's Town Council and the Massachusetts Land Court, which have advised that such measures have been found to be unconstitutional and will undermine the island's sovereignty. The Land Court has cautioned that if voters fail to acknowledge Nantucket's well-established customary practice of vacation rentals, it could leave the town vulnerable to lawsuits, which will compel the judge to take the voting power away from the voters. And I know that because I sat in front of the judge when he said that to the courtroom in February for the Ward 2 trial, as I had been subpoenaed to appear as a witness on behalf of the town.
Caroline, I'm sorry, could you wrap up, please?
Yes, thank you. So as we prepare to cast our votes, the choice before us is not merely about short-term rentals. It is about preserving the essence of what makes our island home so singular and beloved and worthy of the protections of our National Historic Landmark and seasonal community status. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Caroline. In a nutshell, your article would make short-term renting a matter of right in every residential zone district as a matter of zoning law, right?
Correct. It would be reflective of the current customs.
Moving on to Article 67, that's sponsored by Fritz McClure. Fritz came to Nantucket in 1966 and worked for the town as a lifeguard. He bought a house in '83. He was a full-time lawyer and a part-time law professor at BU and is now retired. He served on the planning board and the Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, among other committees. Fritz, why don't you tell us about Article 67?
Okay. Can you hear me, Scott? Okay. Good afternoon. I sponsored this Article 67 because I believe that the regulation of short-term rentals needs to be addressed in our zoning bylaw, and I think a majority of the island's residents agree. 167 places some restrictions on an owner's ability to use their property for short-term rental income, but it includes accommodations to acknowledge the seasonal nature of our economy, and the long history of rentals by homeowners. Article 67 is basically a simplified version of Article 2 from last year's town meeting. Let me summarize the requirements of Article 67 in just 5 short points, and then I'll finish up. First, the owner occupancy requirement, which is a core component of this article, is very liberal and much less than it was in Article 2 last year. It only requires that the owner's family or friends occupy the property for 30 days a year. They need not be consecutive. And I emphasize it can be used on a non-rental basis of not only the family of the owner and the family, but also friends. Second point, the owner can rent on a short-term basis as long as the owner's occupancy is more than the short-term rental occupancy. Let me give a couple of examples to try to help clarify this. Example 1, the owner's family and friends occupy the property for 121 days. The owner can rent on a short-term basis for up to 120 days. Example 2, slightly different. If the owner has a house and a cottage on his property, as I do, and lives in the house for the entire year, the owner could rent the cottage on a short-term basis for the entire year. Point three, Point three, Article 67 does not limit the number of short-term rental contracts per year, and it does not have a specific aggregate limit on the number of rental days. Fourth, during the month of July and August, there is a 7-month minimum stay requirement. The minimum stay requirement for the other 10 months is only 3 days. Finally, I've added an exemption, an additional exemption, so that residential investment property could also qualify. This exception encourages off-peak winter rental for temporary housing. Let me give you an example. If the owner rents to one person for at least 6 months, then the owner need not live in the property for 30 days. The property can be an investment property. They could short-term rent then for up to 6 months. Let me give you another example of a situation that I've heard people mention frequently. And that's the example of what I'll call the generational seasonal family. Owned a house in Nantucket, came on seasonally for a couple of generations. It's become a situation now where the family cannot afford to maintain and keep the property without significant rental income. This would be an opportunity for them to be able to rent the property on a short-term basis for up to 6 months, even if they can't come and occupy the property for 30 days. I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope you will support this article. Thank you. And I don't know why, Carolyn, you are now facing me in the thing. But anyway. Scott?
Thank you, Fritz.
It's somewhat disconcerting to be talking and having Caroline looking at me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was doing that.
Yeah, you were right there front center.
I don't know where I am on your screen.
Okay.
Next up is Patsy Wright. Patsy, over to you.
Just, I gotta get organized. Wait a minute. I'm organized. I don't know if you can see me. There. Hi. Nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Patsy Wright. Nobody asked for my bio. I would have been real happy to give it. But I've been on this island for over 40 years, blah, blah, blah. How many times have we heard that from everybody? But I have, nonetheless. And I know it gets tiresome. I think people are so fatigued at this point with short-term rentals. However, I believe we have to persevere. I've seen how much this island has changed during the time that I've been here. And I know we've been complaining about this island changing for as long as I can remember. Somebody pointed out to me recently that the first change really came when the Wampanoag saw those first sails heading towards them. And there's no better illustration of this other than the fact that my house, with the exception of one, is the only house on this street that is not a short-term rental. I literally have no neighbors left. I used to have neighbors. I used to have really good neighbors, but not anymore. Now it's just these short-term neighbors who are not especially neighborly. My street is now pitch dark and it's pitch dark in the wintertime. But this is the change that's happening now. It really has no name. It's a different change. It's different from anything we've ever had. This change is like a runaway train. To be clear, I'm not against short-term renting, and I completely support neighbors renting their homes in the Nantucket tradition. I myself used to rent my house to the same lovely family every July. It really helped when my kids were going to college. However, the advent of commercial short-term rentals are literally ruining the fabric of our community. I truly believe this. Oh, where was I? Anyway, this is why I sponsored Article 68. Article 68 is a general bylaw amendment, and therefore it only requires a majority vote. My article is very similar to Article 2 from last year, which received a 55% majority vote, which was only 97 votes short of the 2/3 majority that we needed in an audience of 870 people. It was really close. I think this sends a very strong message to what the voters want. My article protects the rights of homeowners to short-term rent their homes in the Nantucket tradition, but it discourages investor-only short-term rentals. Under this article, a homeowner would only have to occupy their property for at least 30 non-consecutive days a year. However, residential use by the owner can also include family and even friends. It's pretty liberal. A person could also short-term rent their house for as many days as they wanted, provided it was one day less than the house is occupied by the owner. This article requires a minimum stay of 7 days in July and August and a minimum stay of 3 days the rest of the year. It's really very simple. So in closing, I would just like to wave a big flag to a gentleman who I only recently just met. This is apropos of nothing in terms of this article, but I really want to talk about him for a second. His name is John Wise. Everybody seems to know John except me. I just met him. He's a successful builder who is putting up 3 houses and 3 cottages on my street. And they are all earmarked to be rented year-round exclusively to the staff at Nantucket Cottage Hospital. And I want to thank John for giving me some neighbors. I'm going to have some neighbors, and people at the cottage hospital are going to have a place to live. This is the direction we need to be going in here. Anyway, thank you very much, Nantucket Civic League, for inviting me to speak today. And that's what I got.
Thank you, Patsy. We'll turn to questions after this final presentation from Matthew Peel. Matthew's from Seattle, Washington, and moved to the island in 2018 to be closer to his wife's family, the Lepres. He serves as vice chair of the Visitor Services Advisory Committee. He's a board member of the Surfside Neighborhood Association and founding member of Nantucket Neighborhoods First, a grassroots community movement brought together over the extreme proposals of past STR articles. Matthew, over to you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate this time today. Yeah, so Article 69. It's definitely, it's new, it's inventive, it's a different approach that we wanted to take to towards STRs. Everyone agrees on Nantucket. Nantucket has a long tradition of vacation rentals, and yet town meeting has consistently voted down past articles seeking liberal any STRs anywhere zoning. Clearly, something has changed with STRs, whether it's the overall number of them on the island or how intensely they are rented. A majority of the voters are concerned about STRs and want to do something. Part of the problem is that despite Nantucket's history, we know very little about STRs operating on Nantucket today. We don't even know how many there are. It might surprise you, there are only about 950 STRs, and that's per our last check about a week or two ago. The local registry. The realtors estimate there are about 1,900. How can we know what the number is if we don't even know what the supply is today? It is even worse to think that STR owners are scoffing at the local registry. Which is a legal requirement for safety and information. With Article 69, Nantucket Neighborhoods First seeks to both contain and study STRs so that Nantucket can make wise decisions. Information, we're really big on providing data to the voters and to everybody in the community. Excuse me. Without the STR floodgates opening and closing, the tap off to, excuse me. Article 69 modifies our existing general bylaw by adding a temporary limit on total allowed STRs of 1,350 for 3 years. This cap gives active STR operators time to get their rentals registered without flooding neighborhoods with an oversupply. So essentially, our article does a few things. It's going to give us time to kind of understand and see what the community wants to do without spiraling STRs out of control. It's going to allow the town to gather data. It's going to allow us to look at the entire island. Should it be zoned off in different areas? Should there be a cap? Should there not be a cap? Is this an issue that we need to look deeper into? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered, and right now, it's a changing community. Week by week, it seems. There's things that are different. We have an economy that's changing greatly right now as well. How is that going to affect the island? This last year we've lost 7 stores and numerous restaurants, and we're posed to lose 2 more restaurants. What is that going to do to the local economy? What is that going to do to the visitors here? And so Article 69 doesn't discriminate against people that live here or don't live here. It doesn't want to open the floodgates. It wants to take a realistic approach to the problem and find some real answers. So thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. We'll turn now to questions. I think most of them are for Caroline Baltzer. So she's probably been reading them, which is good. First one is, what is your response to the Nantucket residents afraid of having the house next door turned into an STR, thereby losing the right of enjoyment, the very real possibility of diminution of property values, and the stress STRs place on our services and natural resources? Is a Nantucketer's right to enjoy their property and concern for our island any less valid?
Thank you. I want to recognize 2 things as I think about answering that question. One is that Nantucket has been a seasonal resort island since the late 1870s, even before really. And all of the neighborhoods on Nantucket, with the exception of Town and Sconset, were built. The infrastructure was put into place for the summer seasonal economy as vacation homes and as rentals, as early as that date. Nantucket is unique in that way in the history. Therefore, in some sense, there's the very real idea that if you move to Nantucket, you're moving to a summer resort island. And yes, there are, in the last 50, 60 years, we have developed mid-island some nice neighborhoods where it's more residential. And I've heard stories. I've been asking a lot of people about this because I really want to understand the other side of this experience. And I do think that those neighborhoods, which were developed by people who were living here year round, that they have experienced a phenomenon that's very different. Like in Brant Point, where I live, Patsy Wright was saying that she's the only light on her street. And I am too. In the winter, I literally am the only light on in Brant Point, it seems. And I know that because it's a summer seasonal colony here, as many of the neighborhoods are. But with these other neighborhoods where people have kids, it is a different experience for them. And I do know that there have been some disrespectful renters or owners. I think that the old visitor code that I know that we had, that we have in our old house from, I think, the 70s, I think that people are not as respectful. And that's one of the things that I've become interested in as a host myself. and trying to do something about that. That doesn't change the fact that there are some neighborhoods where people live with their families and they would prefer those neighborhoods to be no STRs on that neighborhood. I can absolutely appreciate that. When I have asked people about what a solution might be, they have said things like, well, we could have this one neighborhood or this one street zoned for no STR. But then more people will say, we don't want that because someday our kids might want to be able to do it. So I think it's a sticky wicket. And I think it goes back to the fact that we are a seasonal resort island. And that is exactly why the governor has recognized us with the seasonal community status, because we do have challenges that are related to our nature. So I want to both validate it and also to say that our island is different than a mainland community.
Thanks, Caroline. We're pressed for time here. I'm going to try and pick some questions from some others here. A question from Fritz McClure. You have stated in other public forums that you view occupancy compliance to rely on the honesty of those who rent their homes instead of providing proof of registry. However, a simple letter of challenge to the building commissioner from a neighbor is all that is needed to start a zoning review process, which historically ends up in court. This results in expensive litigation to the SCR owner in the town. Is there anything in your article that would stop that? You're muted. You're muted. You're on mute.
I'm not sure how the question relates to anything in my article. No, nothing specific. I have been asked the question, however, quite frequently, as the author of that question has said, about enforcement and how it would be enforced. And there are two sides of that. So first of all, mine's a zoning bylaw. So to the extent that it passes, some of the enforcement of the zoning code, the enforcement of the zoning code is in the hands of the planning department and the building commissioner as the zoning enforcement officer. What he chooses to do in terms of enforcement is not something I can control or I can legislate. The other side of the question is, however, well, I should say, there's also some enforcement under the general bylaw through the health department. And recently, the town has advertised to hire a coordinator to, in effect, I think, administer that program. And under the general bylaw, you have to be in compliance with all other bylaws, including the zoning bylaw, to be able to be issued a certificate to occupy a short-term rental. To use a short-term rental. And just the last thing, to the extent the question is, and I know at a past meeting, annual meeting, somebody raised the question about, well, how's somebody going to prove how many days they lived there? And this is where I was using that example. I think it's pretty simple. The onus is on the owner of the house to prove that they satisfy the 30-day occupancy requirement, or how many days they occupied for purposes of how many days they can short-term rent. I think people are in the initial instance. I would think that the person that was enforcing the article would just simply ask the question and they would be told how many days. To the extent that their further proof is required, it's pretty easy. If you looked at my credit year-end statement on my credit card, you can probably tell where I was every day of the year. And some people will say, well, that's an infringement on people's privacy. Well, it's not an infringement on people's privacy if they're the ones who need to use it to establish how many days they use the property. And presumably that information would be confidential. And I'm only using it as an example. I'm not certainly saying that credit card information has to be used, but that's simply an example of, I think the whole proof requirement is not all that cumbersome. Sorry. Took longer than I thought it would.
That's okay. Thank you very much. For Matthew Peel. sponsor of 69. How do you see the restriction of 70 days of rentals changing the current spread of rentals across high and shoulder season timeframes? For example, would you see a 70-day limit as forcing more rentals into the more profitable high season and making the summer season more busier than it is now?
No, not necessarily. No. I think that's up to the owner. We're not requiring anybody to be in their house or how they use it. 70-day maximum. If they could spread that out if they want. It's not going to force it into the higher season necessarily. It depends on how the operator uses the property, or the owner, excuse me. So I would say not necessarily. I mean, if they want to spread it out, they can. If they want to invite, some of their friends, family to use the house, it's really up to the operator. I don't think 85% of STRs rent for less than 70 days on Nantucket. So that's really up to the owner on how they're going to spread those across their availability, I should say. And I would say that's mainly going to hurt more commercial people, and that's our intent here, is to not hurt, but restrict the commercial uses.
Thank you. We've been going through these issues so many times that some of these questions have become repetitive from forum to forum. And this is one for Caroline Baltzer. If opening up all areas to STR and is proved wrong, how can that article be changed?
This is why it's such a difficult issue. I will give you this, and I saw a little criticism of me that I had pivoted away from an answer, and I'm sorry if I did that. It's a little nerve-wracking to be on the spot, as we all can appreciate. So I'm doing my best, but this is something for me, because I've asked myself the same question. Well, what if? Because I've talked to Matt and I've considered, okay, well, do we need a cap? I've really looked into that. And here's what I come to. So I know a lot about Nantucket's history. One of the things that I know is that in 1919, there were 300 houses that were available to rent for vacation, not boarding houses or hotels, but houses, cottages. In 1927, this is post-war, boom time, kind of like it is now, it shot up to 700. And that was a well-documented figure on Nantucket. In 2025, Matt, you have more updated numbers than I do. But as of a couple of weeks ago, I checked and it was 800 people who have registered for the new local registry. I know that that's not accurate because I myself have not yet done that. I haven't figured out how to do it. So I know that there are going to be more people to go on there, but we are kind of getting into the latter stage of the season. So I don't think it's certainly not going to be 1900. I don't know where a realtor gets that number. But my point there is to say, let's look at it relatively. If at the turn of the century, we had 700 and now we're going to have, probably a little over 1,000. That's very interesting. It shows that with the skyrocketed property values on Nantucket, which is very different than in 1927, it changes the practice of renting one's house. It makes it, it's a naturally down-regulating practice. So I think it's not going to proliferate for that reason.
The question was how do we reverse it if we realize we have the wrong path?
Right. And so what I said is it goes into zoning. So I recognize that is a concern, because once it's in zoning, we can only then use the general bylaws, which we have done, and we can add more as we need it. That's what I love about the zoning, the general bylaws, is that we can always tweak it. But she is right. It goes in there and it stays. So what is reassuring to me is to see the larger trend and the fact that we have two zoning general bylaws that get rid of corporate and investors. We got rid of REITs. Perrin's article was great. It got rid of REITs, and those are the investors.
Thank you. And that'll have to be the final word. We are over time right now. So I want to thank everybody. On behalf of the Nantucket Civic League, I would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to all our presenters. Thank you also to my Civic League colleagues, Maureen Phillips and Rick Atherton, whose assistance was vital in organizing this forum. And as always, thanks to the stalwarts at Nantucket Community Television. Well done. A public YouTube video of today's forum will be released later today for on-demand viewing. We'll advertise a link to encourage further viewings in advance of annual town meeting. NCTV 8 will also be rebroadcasting this forum frequently in the weeks ahead. Finally, thanks to all the viewers and those of you who submitted questions to our speakers. We've got a lot of thinking to do before annual town meeting. In closing, I would like to note that while all town meetings are important, this year's annual town meeting seems especially so. It will consider issues of great importance to all Nantucketers, including how we govern ourselves, how we regulate rentals of homes and cars, how we care for our elderly, how we deal with the housing shortage, and how we deal with our ever-changing environs. Expenditures requests exceed $200 million. It's more important than ever that the voters approach ATM as informed as they can be, and this forum today was our effort to help inform you. We thank you for your participation. This concludes our forum. Would all attendees please mute mics, turn off cameras, and remain silent until NCTV gives me the all clear. Thank you.